All right, let's talk about Illinois, where a huge new law is about to change millions of lives starting in 2026. It's called the Clean Slate Act, and it's all about automatically sealing old criminal records. So, what's the big deal with this law? What does it actually do? And why are people calling it so transformative? Let's get into it.
This quote from Governor Pritzker, it really nails it, right? This whole thing isn't just about some legal paperwork. It's about opening real doors for people. Doors to jobs, to housing, to education. It shifts the focus from a technical, legal change to something that is profoundly human.
Okay, so what exactly is the Clean Slate Act at its core? Well, think of it as a new system that automatically seals certain nonviolent records after a person has done their time and gone through a waiting period. And the magic word here, the one that changes everything, is automated. It takes the burden completely off the individual and puts it on the state.
All right, here's how we're going to break it all down for you. First, we'll look at the old system to see why it was so broken. Then, we'll see how automation completely flips the script. After that, we'll dig into the huge economic and social impact. And finally, we'll see who got behind this law and what happens next.
So first up, let's talk about the problem. Why was this law even needed in the first place? Well, there was a system for sealing records before, but let's just say there was a giant canyon between who could legally get their records sealed and who actually did. Okay, so check out this number. Under the old rules, an estimated 2 million people in Illinois were already eligible to get their records sealed. 2 million! That is a massive number of people who, at least on paper, should have been able to move on with their lives. But, well, that's not what was happening. And here's the reality. Out of those 2 million people, only about 6,000 actually managed to get through the process each year. Do the math. That's a success rate of less than 1%. A tiny, tiny fraction. It was a fundamentally broken system that promised a second chance that almost no one could actually get. So why was it so bad? Well, the old way was basically an obstacle course. You had to file all this complicated legal paperwork, you probably needed a lawyer, which cost a ton of money, and then you had to show up in court. And to make things even crazier, the rules were different in every single one of Illinois' 102 counties. It was just a nightmare to navigate.
Okay, so that was the mess. Now let's talk about the solution. The Clean Slate Act basically flips the whole thing on its head. Instead of making the individual do all that legwork, it shifts the burden to the state agencies. The people who already have all the records anyway.
The new way is so much simpler. Here's how it works. A person finishes their sentence, they wait a couple of years, 2 for misdemeanors, 3 for eligible felonies, and then, boom, the process just starts on its own. The Illinois State Police flags the record, tells the local court, and the record gets sealed. That's it. No complicated forms, no expensive lawyers, no court dates. It just happens.
Now this is a really important point. This law is not a free-for-all. It has very clear guardrails built in for public safety. It doesn't change who is eligible. So we're talking about non-violent offenses. Things like murder, sex offenses, domestic battery, and DUIs. None of that is getting sealed, ever. That stuff stays on a person's public record. And another thing, sealed doesn't mean the record just disappears into thin air. Nope. Law enforcement, prosecutors, the courts, they can always see it. And for certain sensitive jobs, think working in schools or hospitals, employers can still access these sealed records with a proper fingerprint-based background check. So it's all about striking a balance, keeping the public safe while also tearing down unfair barriers to getting a regular job or a place to live.
All right, so we get the how, but what about the so what? What does this actually mean in the real world? Well, it turns out the impact is huge, and it's not just for the individuals involved. It affects the whole economy and even makes our communities safer.
We can actually look at other states that have already done this, and the results are pretty incredible. On average, when someone gets their record cleared, their wages go up by 22% in just the first year. Think about that. That is absolutely life-changing money. It's the difference between just scraping by and actually being able to support your family. And when you zoom out from the individual level, the numbers just get staggering. Experts estimate that this could put up to $4.7 billion in lost wages back into the Illinois economy every single year. That's a massive economic boost for everyone. But it's not just about the money. This is also a huge deal for public safety. Lieutenant Governor Stratton said it perfectly. When people can get a steady job and a safe place to live, they are way less likely to reoffend. It just makes sense, right? You give someone a real path forward and you create this positive feedback loop that makes the entire community safer.
What's maybe most surprising about this whole thing is how it became law. In today's world, you'd expect a big partisan fight, right? But not this time. This law had support from both sides of the aisle, which is pretty amazing, and it paves the way for a much smoother rollout.
On the Democratic side, you had Representative Jehan Gordon Booth, who really championed this. She talked about it as a matter of justice and redemption. The idea that once you've paid your debt to society, that debt should actually be considered paid.
And then you had Republican Senator Seth Lewis, who really highlighted the balance in the law. He made the point that, yes, we're giving people a second chance, but we're also making sure public safety comes first with all those strict rules we talked about. Getting both parties on board like that was really the key to making this happen.
Okay, so a massive change like this doesn't happen with the flip of a switch. The law is signed, but it's going to take a few years to get all the pieces in place. There's a special task force in charge of the rollout, getting all the state agencies and the technology up to speed. The big goal is to have everything running automatically by 2029.
And with this law, Illinois isn't going it alone. It's actually the 13th state to pass a clean slate law, so it's joining a growing movement across the country. And from what experts are saying, the Illinois version is one of the strongest and most comprehensive out there, maybe even a model for other states to follow.
So when you boil it all down, the Illinois Clean Slate Act is so much more than just a new rule. It's really an answer to a pretty deep question. After you've served your time, when does the punishment actually end? This law says that for these nonviolent offenses, it shouldn't be a life sentence of closed doors. It says the path forward should be open. And it kind of leaves us all with something to think about. What does a real second chance truly look like?